Yo, what's going on, guys? We're back with another video, and today we're back to our VGC Fundamentals series where we talk a little bit more about how to EV certain Pokemon in certain ways. And again, last time we were looking at speed tiers, and even before that, I taught you how to do your your damage bonuses, your plus ones, your minus ones, and even before that, we explained what EV benchmarks were, or EV bumps. And now the next part of our journey in creating our own EV spread is understanding how to optimize HP EVs. Okay, and again, don't worry about the sprites on the screen below. That was just from like the previous battle video. I just forgot to change it. That doesn't matter. But we're going to be looking at specific examples on how to do this, and then I'll be asking you, the viewer, to also try and come up with some of the answers to the questions that I'll be giving you, where I'll ask you to pause the video and see if you can figure it out, and then play it, so this way you can confirm whether your answer is correct. I think that's a little bit better and more engaging, especially for those that are, kind of new to the metagame. And that's what these videos are for our fundamental series. They just explain the nitty-gritty of EV training certain Pokemon in certain ways, just because they have specific purposes in VGC. And again, if you want to optimize EV spreads, these are some of the things you have to do. And again, we do all of this more in depth with our one-on-one coaching. That is a tier 3 sub to the channel. So if you're interested in coaching and getting better at team building in competitive play, take a look at our video description. There is a link there to join the channel for a tier 3 sub, where you and I, we can sit down in a Discord call, and I'll show you how to hash out EV spreads and how to build a team just from scratch. All right, but anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and look at some examples. So here I got Yveltal on the screen. We're going to use Yveltal as our first example, and one of the things you want to keep in mind in creating an EV spread is understanding how to optimize for weather damage, and that's also known as residual damage. And what do we mean by weather damage? We're talking about hail chip, we're talking about sand, right? Stuff from like max hailstorm and max rockfall. That's what generates the sand and hail chip. So the general rule is you always want to have one less than a multiple of 16. All right, because then this will undercut the threshold, and when you do the math, it'll round it down, but still you have the more optimal HP. So this way you have some bulk. Okay, and what that means is it's better if I just show you in terms of a number. Okay, so let's say I have Yveltal here. All right, and let's say I have an investment of, let's say, right up here to 208. Okay, so now if you do the math, right, let's say there's hailstorm chip, there's rockfall chip, the sandstorm and hail. If you do the math, I have my calculator here. The rule is you're taking 1/16 of your max health every turn. So what is 208 divided by 16? All right, that comes out to 13. Okay, so that means you're taking 13 points of damage per turn from the weather. Okay, but what we can do is we can do what's called optimization, and optimize so that way we have some HP bulk, the most amount we can have, but still undercut this threshold value. So, and that rule is for 207, right? This is what I mean by one less than a multiple of 16, because if you do the math now, 207 divided by 16, okay, is 12.9375, and in Pokemon, stuff like this rounds down. So you're not taking 12.9 points of weather damage. That doesn't exist. It'll round down to 12. So 1 HP less, but now I'm also taking less damage from residual weather damage. All right, that's how you do it. Okay, and you can even invest more HP where you can still hold true to this rule, right? So if I do 16 times 13, right? So if I go to 16 times 14, if I go to 224, same idea, right? If I go to 224, right, a little bit more bulk. Okay, 224 divided by 16, right? Doing on my calculator, that comes out to 14. But again, I want to undercut that. I don't want to be taking a perfect 14 points of sand and hail chip per turn. I'll undercut it by 1 to 223, right? One less than a multiple of 16. So now I'm taking 223 divided by 16 All right, 13.9375. Okay, so which rounds down to 13 damage per turn, right? So 1 less HP, but again, I optimize my full stat so that way I'm taking 1 less chip per turn. All right, and if you look on Picolytics, this is always like a very common EV investment in terms of HP for Yveltal, right? 223, and now you know why. So when you're thinking about EVing your certain Pokemon, you always want to take into account the residual damage. That's one way of looking at HP EVs. All right, so there's other things that we are going to be looking at, and the next one that I want to look at is Life Orb chip. So there's another rule for that. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so let's use Charizard as our example for Life Orb chip, because this is a very common item on Charizard. So the rule for Life Orb is you're going to be taking 1/10 of your max HP after you go for an attack, right? So now if we look at Charizard's HP stat, so now again you're thinking about, okay, how do I optimize this where like I'm not taking as much Life Orb chip as I would by once again undercutting that threshold, right? So if the rule is 1/10, okay, so what would be the next possible HP stat that I would have to undercut this Life Orb chip damage, right? So pause the video, let me know what you think that number would be, and then we'll confirm if your answer is correct. All right. All right, if you said 159, you are correct, right? So why 159? Well, if you do 159 divided by 10, that comes out to 15.9, right? And again, just like with the Sand chip and the Hail chip, you can't take 15.9 points of damage per turn from Life Orb. That doesn't exist. All right, so Pokemon's going to round it down. So instead, you'll be taking 15 points of damage per turn. All right, but again, if you pass the threshold, if you go to 160, okay, this is bad. Well, bad, I put it in quotes, in the sense that you're now taking an extra point of damage per turn that you normally shouldn't be taking, because what is 160 divided by 10? 16. So now you're taking an extra point of damage per turn from Life Orb. But if you undercut it, if you go to 159, now you're only taking 15, all right? So now you might say, oh, it's just 1 HP. What is that going to do? Listen, in competitive play, all you need is 1 HP to make a difference, right? Because that makes a difference between dying and surviving. And if you're surviving, means you can get off one more attack, which could win you the game. So this is what it's all about here. The nitty gritty stuff, all right, the things that nobody ever really thinks about in the beginning when they're first starting into competitive play, but makes all the difference in the long run, right? Sometimes when you're playing opponents, it all comes down to your EV spreads, and this is how you do it, right? As opposed to, your own gameplay. So now let me show you something a little bit more bulkier. All right, let's say if I have something like Dialga, okay? Now, I don't want to max the HP to 207. I want to optimize this a little bit less where I can still take minimal damage from the Life Orb chip, right? So pause the video. Let me know what you think you can set this HP number at to optimize our Life Orb chip damage, all right? So go ahead and do it. All right, if you said 199, that is correct, right? So this is where, other EV spreads come into play. Now you can go 199 here, which will optimize to 19.9, which rounds down to 19. Because if you're at this 207, I know you have, like 8 more HP, but you're also taking 20.7, aka 20 damage of Life Orb chip per turn. So better yet, just invest like the points here and then add more into defense or special defense. You'll get more bang for your buck that way in the long run, right? So either you can go to 199 or you could even go to 189. All right, these are two very common numbers for something that's super bulky that wants a Life Orb. All right, now you can even go to 179. All right, and then now you're, you don't have that much HP, but then you can invest more into like special attack, bulk, and maybe speed. Maybe you're a faster Dialga, but again, this is all later on when we start coming up with a full EV spread. But I'm just showing you one aspect of doing EVs like I did in the other videos. All right, so that'll do it for Life Orb chip. Let's move on to the next one where we start talking about berries. Okay, so for our next example, let's look at Incineroar here for a second. So right now, in terms of berry recovery, something like a citrus berry, which is a very common item on Incineroar in this format. Again, if you read citrus berry, it says it recovers 1/4 of your max HP when you're at half max HP or less. All right, so 1/4. So that means, you know, a general rule with something like this berry is you want a multiple of 4, right? So right now I have a max HP Incineroar, right? 252 investment, giving me a HP stat of 202. Now that's pretty good, but is it quote unquote optimal for the berry recovery? All right, so pause the video, let me know if you think the answer is yes or if you think the answer is no. And if you think the answer is no, what would be the stat to optimize this? Okay, so I'll give you 5 seconds. Pause the video now. If you said the answer is no, you are correct. And if you said the answer should be 200, that is also correct. Why? Because again, if you do the math, what is 202, right? A fourth of that. Is it divisible by 4? Let's see, 202 with my calculator divided by 4. All right, it is 50.5. Again, I can't be recovering 50.5 HP, right? So this will round it down to 50. So it looks like I'm wasting HP EVs in this sense. So I might as well just drop it a little bit where I still get 50 HP recovery. So I need a perfect 50 when I divide my HP stat by 4. And if you said, again, the answer is not 201, but 200, now it's divisible by 4 because 200 divided by 4 is a perfect 50. And what this does is now I have 16 extra EVs to invest either somewhere else, whether it's speed, defense, special defense. You know, these little points like 8, 16, or 20 EVs, they make a difference in surviving certain attacks, right? You might live with 1 HP, you might die, right? So it makes all the difference. And again, if you want to drop it again a little bit lower, what would be the next number? All right, is it 199? Is it 198? Again, just do the math. What is 198 divided by 4? Okay, it says 49.5. So that's not optimal. I need something that's 49 because I want something that's perfectly divisible by 4. So I would go, let's see again, let's just drop it one more. 197. Is that divisible by 4? All right, and you can do this step by step with your calculator, even if you're not good at math. All right, we're not doing calculus here. All right, we're just optimizing Pokemon EVs. 197 divided by 4, 49.25. All right, I'm not there yet. Okay, what about one more? 196. Okay, so 196 divided by 4. All right, now I got my perfect 49. This is another optimal number for berry recovery. And now again, I have all these EVs to play with where I can invest it either in my bulk or my attack, my speed, whatever. Okay, the point is it's optimized for the berry recovery and I'm not wasting HP EVs that way. All right, so let's look at another example here where we use berries. All right, so here's Groudon, right? Again, Groudon is another common user of berries for recovery. So I'll put the citrus berry on here because that's the more common berry that Groudons like to run. So again, I've maxed the HP to 207 now, but the question is this optimal for the berry recovery, right? So pause the video, let me know if you think it is, and if it isn't, what should be the number to make this optimal but still having a good amount of HP bulk. All right, so I'll give you 5 seconds. All right, if you said no, you are correct, and if you said the answer is 204, you are also correct, right? So if let's play with the numbers. So first of all, what is 207 divided by 4, right? 51.75. Again, I can't get that recovery in terms of, you know, my berry. So what I want to do is drop this stat a little bit where I can get, you know, max amount of recovery. So what would that be? Well, if it's 206 or 205, all right, again, if you just want to do the math, it's still going to give you a decimal. But if I go to 204, all right, what is 204 divided by 4, right? Is that divisible? It is. It's a perfect 51. So this is where the berry is a little bit more optimized in terms of getting recovery because you're still getting 51 HP recovery, right? So whether it's 228 investment or 207 investment, you're still getting only 51 recovery. And now I have extra EVs to play with where I can put it somewhere else. All right, so that's the idea with berries. Now let's take a look at something else where we look at terrain. Okay, so now let's look at Rillaboom here because Rillaboom, it has the ability called Grassy Surge where, you know, in terrain, it'll, you know, summon that terrain and then you get what's called Grassy Terrain Recovery. And the rule is opposite of the sand and hail chip, where you want a perfect number that's divisible by 16, okay? Because that'll optimize your recovery. So if you're looking at Rillaboom, if you go max HP, right, 207, unfortunately, even though it's good to do it, for Rillaboom specifically, is it quote unquote optimal for the terrain? Well, again, if you do that math, 207 is a good number to undercut the hail chip, but in terms of grassy terrain recovery, it's not so good. All right, in the sense that 207 divided by 16 is 12.9375 again. So that means I rounded down to 12 points of recovery, which means I'm wasting a bunch of EVs here. All right, where I can drop this, where I still get a perfect 12, and then invest that either in defense or special defense. Now, is it quote unquote bad to do 252 HP Rillaboom? No, okay. But if the question was, is this optimizing for grassy terrain? The answer is no, okay. Now, what is going to optimize it is if I undercut it to the next value, where I get my perfect 12. So you would just do a little bit of math, and again, you would drop it to this mark, 192. This is why on Peakalytics you always see this HP investment spread, 132, right? Because what is 192 divided by 16, okay? It is 12. So if I have 192 HP, all right, I get 12 HP recovery from grassy terrain. If I have 207 HP, I get 12 HP of grassy terrain recovery still, right? Because 12.9 rounds down to 12. So now what I end up doing here is then I can just invest this stuff into, you know, a little bit more defense and a little bit more special defense. But again, the idea is I have more EVs to play with in the rest of my bulk, whereas I'm not quite optimizing in the HP stat, all right? That's the main idea with grassy terrain. So hopefully this clarifies a couple of things with the terrain. And also, if you want to go one value less, if you want 11, all right, that would have to be 176 right here, which is only 4 investment, but you're never going to see this, all right? It's always good to have some bulk on your Rillaboom, but 176 and 192, these are often the common benchmarks, and then the next one should be 208, but we don't have something that's above 100 HP value, right? Otherwise, we can reach 208, and then we can optimize my grassy terrain recovery. But I don't, so I just go to 192, and then I can just play with these extra EVs elsewhere in the bulk, the attack, the speed, whatever I want. All right. Now, the last thing I want to mention with optimizing HP EVs is to talk a little bit about abilities, because your abilities also affect whether you gain or lose HP. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so for this next and last part of the video, so again, we're looking at specific abilities and moves that rely on HP stats. So we're looking at Charizard again, but this time we're looking at Solar Power. We're looking at Porygon in terms of recovery moves. Mungus with the ability called Regenerator. Tapu Fini with something called Heal Pulse, and even Zygarde with Power Construct, and also with Fini, the leftovers, right? I forgot to mention this item earlier in the video, but also leftovers, right? So let's look at Zard here. So if you read what Solar Power does, again, we're already losing HP from Life Orb, right? Now we're losing even more HP from something called Solar Power. And again, the rule is we're losing 1/8 of our max HP per turn. All right, so this is why you want to try and optimize this so you're not breaking any thresholds where you're taking any more unnecessary damage. Okay, and again, this number is very convenient to be 159 in this sense. Okay, because what's the difference between 159 and 160 for Solar Power? Well, if you do in your calculator 1/8 of 159, it comes out to about 19.875, which rounds down to 19. So you're taking 19 points of damage per turn thanks to Solar Power, right? But if you do 160, okay, if you do 160 divided by 8, all right, if you had to do it on your calculator, now it's 20. So I'm taking 1 more HP from Solar Power and also Life Orb that I shouldn't be taking, okay? Whereas if I undercut this to 159, I don't take as much as I should, right? I save myself about 2 HP, which is important, right, in terms of optimization. All right, so this is what we mean. You should read these things, okay? Because if you read, you understand how the math works, and then you can figure out how to do it with the numbers, all right? Reading is fundamental. All right, Porygon, same idea. If you read Porygon's ability, recover, heals the user by 50% of its max HP. Oh, I took it away. Where'd it go? Okay, so what that means is this is why you see some Porygons just literally go to certain numbers. All right, so if you do 192, all right, what's 192 divided by 2? 96. Okay, so you're getting 96 recovery per turn when you click recover. All right, if you do 191, that's good for Hail and Sand Chip, but again, 191 divided by 2, you're getting a decimal 95.5, which rounds down to 95. So you're still only getting 95 recovery per turn, whereas if I break the threshold, now I get 96. Okay, so that's another thing to consider. Like, do I want to optimize for the Sand and Hail Chip, or do I want to optimize for something like recover? That's the idea there. Amoonguss, Regenerator, and also Ho-Oh also has Regenerator, but I'm just using Amoonguss for the example here because, you know, that's just what showed up. So what does Regenerator do? Restores a third of your max HP rounded down when it switches out. Okay, very conveniently that it tells me it rounds it down. So if you go to 252 investment, again, is this optimal? Okay, I ask you, and once again I ask you to pause the video. Is this optimal for Regenerator recovery? Tell me. And if it isn't, what number should it be? Okay, if you said the answer was no, you are correct. And if you said the answer was 219, that is correct. So what this does is, let's say I picked a nature from my Amoonguss. Let's say I picked Relaxed Nature and I go for the bump. Again, if you don't know what EV bumps are, watch our video on the channel to understand it. But here's the bump for defense, and then the rest just gets dumped into my special defense, right? This is my Amoonguss spread. But is this optimal for Regenerator? The answer is no, because what does Regenerator say one more time? A third of your max HP. If you, again, had to do it in your calculator, 221, all right, with a third of it, all right, let me just plug it in. It comes out to 73.66667, all right, which rounds down to 73. That means I'm wasting HP EVs because it's still rounding down. What if I just drop the HP a little bit where I still recover 73 and then invest the remaining HPs in bulk? So this is what I mean. So if you do the math, 219 is the optimal number, right? Because if you do 219, all right, times a third of that, okay, so that comes out to a perfect 73. Again, you know, this is where people don't know how to do math, right? Not me, I do know. So now look at this. I have 16 extra EVs that I can invest somewhere. I can put it in defense. I can put in special defense here. I'll just throw it here because I already have the bump in defense. So now I have better special defense investment, and it might make me live a special attack with like 1 or 2 HP that I would not live if I didn't have that investment. All right, so that's the Regenerate. Now what about leftovers? So leftovers here with Finny, again, 116. There's that 116th value again. So very conveniently, Tapu Fini's HP is very kind to us. If you have 177, again, is this optimal? The answer is no. Okay, what should it be? Pause the video and tell me. Okay, if you said the answer should be 176, you are correct. Because again, if you had to do the math, 177 divided by 16, 11.06. Why not just drop it by 1 HP and make it perfect 11, and then I have an extra HP or an extra EV to invest somewhere else? Okay, this is what I mean. Heal Pulse heals the target by 50% of its max HP, right? So if you're thinking about your partner mon, you want to optimize that Heal Pulse. So let's say we had Zygarde, right? That, and very conveniently, you know, we have the sprites in the video. So Tapu Fini, right? This is our sprite, and also Zygarde. We just used this in the previous cart video. So Zygarde, we want something to get optimal recovery from Heal Pulse, right? 50%. So I have this spread, right? And I wanted to make sure my HP number matched with Heal Pulse a little bit. If I broke this, let's say I take some of it away. If I went to 211, right? Because what is 211 divided by 2, right? 50% recovery, 105.5, which rounds down to 105. So why do I need to do that when I can just, you know, make it a perfect even number, right? 210, all right? And now I still get, you know, 105 recovery from Heal Pulse from Tapu Fini. All right, and then that being said, you also have this other ability if you're a Zygarde user, Power Construct. I won't talk about it because, you know, it's not common unless you're someone that specifically uses Zygarde. But again, you go to Zygarde Complete if 1/2 of your max HP is reached. So again, if I have, you know, 211, you know, it's an odd number, it rounds it down. Why not just go to an even number like 210 just to optimize it, right? So this is what we mean in terms of optimizing that HP spread for certain abilities and skills. All right, so we talked about weather, we talked about life orb, we talked about berries, leftovers, terrain, certain abilities and skills in our concluding section. So these are all general things you want to consider when trying to optimize EVs for your Pokemon. All right, hopefully you learned something. Thanks for watching all. And again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join the Discord. All right, remember, we have a Discord here. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, check out coaching on the channel where we do all of this more in depth, where we build a team from scratch while keeping intact our rules that we talked about for optimizing EV spread. So definitely take a look at that. It's a tier 3 sub, only $9.99, very, very affordable. And again, it's regional and tournament time. So definitely want to book a session with me and see if we can make your team better than it already is. All right, so thanks for watching. We'll be back next time. Have a good one.